Hey guys, it's Barking Madly here. Had a chance to watch both episodes of the Doomsday Preppers and just wanted to offer up some thoughts and stuff on it. Actually even took a little bit of notes and whatnot on it. Overall, I thought they did a pretty good job on it. There's some things about it I wasn't real comfortable with and didn't really like the way they did, but I guess overall it's picking nits. The first episode was, what was it called? Bullets, lots of bullets, and they had three different sections of the show. The first one was on Paul and Gloria Range. They are these guys that live in Texas. They've got a house that's built out of a bunch of steel containers and steel shipping containers, the Z vans, you might know them. And they've got, I guess, like 50,000 pounds of food, and they've got a pretty rock solid setup in terms of being self-sufficient. They've got a lot of farm animals. They've got enough energy supplies in terms of methane and solar and wind power. They don't necessarily have a whole lot other than the animals in terms of food to be able to produce, but they live in Texas, and from what I could see, it looked like they lived in a fairly arid area, so there's not going to be a whole lot of farming they'd be able to do anyways. But overall, it was pretty solid. And then they've got, an interesting bug-out plan. Then at the end of that, of course, they always have the expert opinion on it. And the one big concern they expressed was the fact that they had all their food in one of the containers, which, fair enough. And I kind of want to bring in, one of the big issues I had with this was actually the so-called experts. It's a group called Practical Preppers, and I've looked at their website, and basically it's a preparedness website. They sell a few products and they offer consulting. I'm not really sure I buy that they're any kind of expert on it. I mean, some of what they say I agree with in their review of the different preppers, and some of it I kind of call horseshit on. If you happen to watch the pilot episode of this several months back where Southern Prepper 1 was on it, Southern Prepper 1 I think is pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, is kind of a benchmark in terms of, how you would evaluate other preppers. In terms of the ideal. They've got division of labor, large community, lots of supplies, lots of resources, and just well organized. And the experts for Southern Prepper 1 said, "Oh, you need to be a little bit more low key. You stand out a little bit." And my thoughts were, good grief, you live on a farm. How do you hide the fact that it's a farm? I mean, at some point, maybe they were just trying to find something that the guy could improve on. But I mean, it's at some point, if you've got 10 to 20 acres of farmland, you really can't hide that you've got 10 to 20 acres of farmland. So, at any rate, the so-called experts are somebody that I don't know that I buy it. In fact, I think either having that expert and maybe having all the preppers that they had on the show review each other might have been an interesting way to go about it, or you have a community effort on it or something. But quite honestly, I think I'd trust Southern Prepper 1's review of other people's preps more than I would trust these guys. And hell, I mean, if all it takes is having a website and selling stuff, then I guess that makes Dardi an expert, because he's been prepping a while and he's got stuff he sells. So, and at any rate, that's probably picking nits. But at any rate, the first group, they did a pretty good job talking about it and whatnot. The one thing I kind of did notice on it is that their reason for prepping was that they were afraid of a polar realignment, and then you'd have all this tectonic shift, and you'd have states moving. Texas could move by 2 or 3 degrees latitude or something like that. While sometimes they tended to put little blurbs in the bottom of the show that said, this is a fact or that's a fact. Sometimes it seemed to come across a little snarky, and other times it just seemed to kind of ignore certain facts. Like, being prepped is a good thing, but I think if you're worried about continents drifting by miles or hundreds of miles, maybe the Mayan, some of the whole 2012 stuff seems to imply that might happen. But as far as I'm aware, the largest tectonic movement they've ever had in any one large earthquake has been about 20 or 30 feet. Even the massive Indonesian earthquake that caused, back in Christmas of 2004, I think that only moved, I think it was like 16 to 20 feet vertical movement and a few inches laterally. But at any rate, I mean, they did some pretty decent jobs on it. Then the second person they talked to in that first episode was Christopher Nyberger. This is the guy that walks around LA eating the plants off of the LA River and stuff like that. And quite honestly, that's his concern is for a massive earthquake here in Southern California. And that's what's got me prepping as well, or concerned about it, whatever you want to call it. They didn't go into any detail about how the guy set up at his house, how he set up in his cars. They just dealt with the fact that the guy likes to walk around and he can basically live off the nap of the earth, as it were. And pretty well done. I think they did. They raised some valid concerns about being a little bit more broadly prepped in terms of water and food, just simply because of the fact that the streets are probably going to be a very busy place in the aftermath of an earthquake. And then the final one was Megan Hurwitz, which is the 20-something living in Houston, I believe. And, she's a young lady, single from what I could tell, and doesn't have a whole lot of resources, either space or money, to do a whole lot of prepping. Give her a lot of credit for doing what she's trying to do. And I think, her idea of bugging out to Mexico, and then eventually after they mentioned it, her thoughts about joining the military, I give her props for all that stuff. The experts on that said, you need to look into having more supplies on hand. And this is another one of the ones where I look at the experts and go, really? I mean, yes, in an ideal world, yeah, everybody's going to have 1,000 gallons of fresh water and 3 years worth of freeze-dried food and probably 6 months worth of less or slightly more perishable foods. But, taking into account the fact that she lives in a 700 square foot apartment and lives there with her cats, maybe with her boyfriend, and also clearly she had a gun safe and she had a lot of other, equipment and whatnot, and the fact that she has, a few weeks worth of food from the looks of it, 2 to 3 at least, you got to take into consideration where the person's at for this whole thing. And I just thought the so-called experts on that pretty much screwed the pooch on that one. And then we got the second show was I Hope It Never Happens. And the first person that they talked to was everybody's favorite YouTube prepper right now, is Dardi. And actually I thought he came across pretty good. Just to see what he thought about it, or what his comments were, I went over to his channel afterwards, and he says he tried to make preppers look like a bunch of lunatics. He looks a little bit silly wearing his load-bearing equipment, swinging around his AR-15 or his M14. Don't remember exactly which one he had. And yeah, he looks a little silly, but at the same time, he seemed to push, or he seemed to have a common theme, which a lot of the preppers did overall in both shows, in that they want to help their community out. And I think that's one of the most positive messages, I think, out of the whole series of shows, is that it's not just about helping themselves survive, that a lot of them are actually looking to try to help other people. And I think that's a really good positive message. So, Dardi, if you're trying to look like an idiot and a freak, I don't think you totally succeeded there, so sorry, bud. But anyway, there was him, and I kind of had to give some props to the experts there, because quite frankly, Dardi, his biggest issue is the fact that he's a little bit overweight there. It's not clear in the episode of whether or not he has a group of people to help out or not. I don't really follow his channel, so I don't know whether he does have friends or not. But quite clearly, going lone wolf, I think, is another big issue that, especially for that type of prepping that he's trying to do, it's just not going to be feasible. But, they didn't touch on that at all, so who knows. Again, it's a TV show. They're trying to get ratings and whatnot. But it would have been interesting if they, to get not just a single focus on, he's focused on prepping foods, he's focused on prepping and communications and whatnot. Would have been interesting to get a more broad scope of what kind of preps he does. And not just him, but everybody in general. Like I said, the guy that walks around LA eating the plants. A broader scope. Now, maybe part of the preppers that they showed, maybe they didn't want to show that, and that's cool. I just wish they, the show, it would have been a little more thorough on that. And he mentioned, anyways, with this Dardi one, his main reason for prepping is because of EMP, whether it's solar or nuclear. He mentioned the solar EMP, but some of the information he gave in terms of about destroying electronics, a nuclear EMP will destroy pretty much any electronic that's not hardened. A solar EMP, your biggest threat is going to be anything that's got long wires attached to it. I don't think, you know, if you unplug the electronics in your house, I don't think you'd have to worry about it. Maybe electronics in your car, I don't know. That starts to get to a large enough conductor. I don't know, that might be an issue, but if you've got stuff unplugged from the wall sockets and you've got your fuses shut off from the power grid, you should be fine. But the next one they talk about is Colleen Bishop. She's the mother or the woman that loves to cook. She's a financial investor of some sort, and you know, as she's big into being a foodie. She loves training both herself, her husband, and her community. Can't remember I don't have a note on exactly what they said her biggest failure was, but overall it was pretty cool. Again, seeing somebody that's not just looking at, you know, the whole, you know, surviving the end of the world exclusively, but doing it with some taste, you know, having a bunch of different foods available, teaching people how to do it, sharing with your community. I thought that was really, really cool that they talked about that. The next one, Kathy Harrison. This is one of the ones I thought was the most unique and actually kind of interesting that they had it on the show. She's the liberal, the anti-gun person they had up in, I guess, Maine or somewhere up in New England. I didn't catch where. No guns, big into the whole community thing, and her concern is what they referred to as black swan events. I guess her thing was the basically it's the earthquake in the center of the United States, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of that earthquake, the New Madrid fault. And it was interesting, you know, definitely a very positive community-based thing, and one of the big things, and I think it's very definitely a reasonable and rational concern that the quote-unquote experts had, was the fact that there's no real thought given to self-protection. Although it was interesting, and I don't know whether this was off-the-cuff little blurb that they picked up, but I'm sure everybody out there heard it, was the one young dude that was saying, well, yeah, we'll bring him in, we'll have him talk to us, and if we think he's cool, we'll offer him to, you know, maybe he can join us, and if not, we'll slit his throat while he sleeps, or, going back to Dardi 1, poisoning him. So, just because you're a liberal doesn't mean you love everybody either. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. I think it's a little naive, and I think it's a little pie in the sky to think that everybody will be love and kumbaya, and everybody has a place, but you know, I give them credit for the thought. I think that they're a little bit do think they're a bit naive. Then the last one was Dennis Evers, and this is the family up in Colorado, the father and all of his kids that are prepping in terms of water, fuel, security, and all that other stuff. It's interesting. I thought they were really, really well versed in terms of being, you know, taking basically just a slightly extended family and being really diversified in terms of what they're able to do. But again, I think the experts did kind of nail the head on this one where they talk about fuel. Having a stockpile of lumber isn't exactly fuel. If you've got things that are gasoline dependent, diesel dependent, natural gas, propane, whatever, having a stockpile of lumber really doesn't cover you for it. One of the things that Southern Prepper 1 and his buddy Engineer 775, I think it is, you know, they've got a way of distilling wood and getting the flammable vapors out of it, so you can run a car or you can run a stove off of it and not necessarily smell like you're burning wood. And I think the folks up in Colorado definitely have some room to go on that. But at any rate, it was interesting. Again, I think the show overall was pretty solid. I questioned the experts on it. But quite honestly, and quite frankly or whatever, I think the prepper community here on YouTube would have a better and more thorough way of evaluating the folks that were on here. So I put it to you guys, if you've actually made it this far, what do you think about these guys? What do you think their weak points were? What do you think their strong points were? And how would you rate it? Anyway, This is Barking Madly. Have a good one.